Hello, you perfectly lovely muggles. My name is Sarah and I'm reading from Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by J.K Rowling. We're on to the second part of Chapter 9, The Midnight Duel. You're joking. It was dinner time and Harry had just finished telling Ron what had happened when he had left the grounds with Professor McGonagall. Ron had a piece of steak and kidney pie halfway to his mouth, but he'd forgotten all about it. Seeker, he said. But the first year's never... You must be the youngest house player in about a century, said Harry, shoveling pie in his mouth. He felt particularly hungry after the excitement of the afternoon. Wood told me. Ron was so amazed, so impressed, he just sat and gaped at Harry. I start training next week, said Harry. Only don't tell anyone because Wood wants to keep it a secret. Fred and George Weasley now came into the hall, spotted Harry and hurried over. Well done, said George in a low voice. Wood told us we're on the team too. Peters. I tell you, we are going to win that Quidditch Cup for sure this year, said Fred. We haven't won since Charlie left, but this year's team is going to be brilliant. You must be good, Harry. Wood was almost skipping when he told us. Anyway, we've got to go because Lee Jordan reckons that he's found a new secret passageway out of the school. I bet it's the one behind the statue of Gregory the Smarmy that we found in our first week. See ya! Fred and George had hardly disappeared when someone far less welcome turned up. Malfoy, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. Having a last meal, Potter? When are you getting the train back to the Muggles? You're a lot braver now you're back on the ground and you've got your little friends with you, said Harry coolly. There was, of course, nothing at all little about Crabbe and Goyle, but as the high table was full of teachers, neither of them could do more than crack their knuckles and smile. I'd take you on any time on my own, said Malfoy. Tonight, if you want. Wizard's duel, one's only, no contact. What's the matter? Never heard of a wizard's duel before, I suppose. Of course he has, said Ron, wheeling round. I'm his second, who's yours? Malfoy looked at Crabbe and Goyle, sizing them up. Crabbe, he said. Midnight, all right? We'll meet you in the trophy room. That's always unlocked. When Malfoy had gone, Ron and Harry looked at each other. What's a wizard's duel? Said Harry. And what do you mean you're my second? Well, a second is there to take over if you die, said Ron casually, getting started at last on the cold pie. Catching a look on Harry's face, he quickly added, but people only die in proper duels, with real wizards. But most you and Malfoy will be able to do is to send sparks at each other. Neither of you knows enough magic to do any real damage. I bet he expected you to refuse anyway. And what if I wave my wand and nothing happens? Throw it away, punch him in the nose, Ron suggested. Excuse me. They both looked up. It was Hermione Granger. Can't a person eat in peace in this place, said Ron. Hermione ignored him and spoke to Harry. I couldn't help overhearing what you and Malfoy were saying. Bet you couldn't, Ron muttered. And you mustn't go wandering around the school at night. Think of the points that you'll lose, Gryffindor, if you're caught. And you're bound to be. This is really very selfish of you. And it is really none of your business, said Ron. Bye, said Harry. All the same, it wasn't what you would call the perfect end to the day, Harry thought, as he lay awake much later listening to Dean and Seamus falling asleep. Neville wasn't back from the hospital wing, and Ron had spent all evening giving him advice such as, if he tries to curse you, you better dodge it because I can't remember how to block them. There was a very good chance that they were going to get caught by Filch or Mrs. Norris, and Harry felt he was pushing his luck. Breaking another school rule today? On the other hand, Malfoy's sneering face kept looming up out of the darkness, and this was his big chance to beat Malfoy face to face. He couldn't miss it. 11:30, Ron muttered at last. Better go. They pulled on their dressing gowns, picked up their wands, and crept across the tower room, down the spiral staircase, and into the Gryffindors' common room. A few embers were still glowing in the fireplace, turning all the armchairs into hunched black shadows. They had almost reached the portrait's hole when a voice spoke from the chair nearest them. "I can't believe you're going to do this, Harry." A lamp flickered on. It's Hermione Granger, wearing a pink dressing gown and a frown. "You," said Ron furiously, "go back to bed." "I almost told your brother," Hermione snapped. "Percy, he's a prefect. He'd put a stop to all this." Harry couldn't believe that anyone could be so interfering. "Come on," he said to Ron. He pushed open the portrait of the fat lady and climbed through the hole. Hermione wasn't going to give up that easily. She followed Ron through the portrait hole, hissing at them like an angry goose. "Don't you care about Gryffindor? Do you only care about yourselves? I don't want Slytherin to win the House Cup, and you'll lose all the points I got from Professor McGonagall for knowing about switching spells." "Go away." "All right, but I warn you, you just remember what I said when you're on the train home tomorrow. You're so..." But what they were, they didn't actually find out. Hermione had turned to the portrait of the fat lady to get back inside and found herself facing an empty painting. The fat lady had gone on a nighttime visit and Hermione was locked out of the Gryffindor Tower. "Now what am I going to do?" she said shrilly. That's your problem," said Ron. "We've got to go. We're going to be late." They hadn't even reached the end of the corridor when Hermione caught up with them. "I'm coming with you," she said. "You are not." "Do you think I'm going to stand out here and wait for Filch to catch me? If he finds all three of us, I'll tell them the truth, that I was trying to stop you and you can back me up." "You have got some nerve," said Ron loudly. "Oh, shut up, both of you," said Harry sharply. "I heard something." It was a sort of snuffling. "Mrs. Norris," breathed Ron, squinting through the dark. It wasn't Mrs. Norris, it was Neville. He was curled up on the floor, fast asleep, but jerked suddenly awake as they crept nearer. "Thank goodness you found me. I've been out here for hours. I couldn't remember the new password to get into bed." "Keep your voice down, Neville. The password's pig's snout. But it won't help you now because the fat lady's gone off somewhere." "How's your arm?" said Harry. "Fine," said Neville, showing them. "Madame Pomfrey mended it in about a minute." "Good. Well, look, Neville, we've got to be somewhere, so we'll see you later." "Don't leave me," said Neville, scrambling to his feet. "I don't want to stay here alone. The bloody Baron's been passed twice already." Ron looked at his watch and glared furiously at Hermione and Neville. "If either of you get us caught, I'll never rest until I've learnt that cursed of the bogies Quirrell told us about and used it on you." Hermione opened her mouth, perhaps to tell Ron exactly how to use the curse of the bogies, but Harry hissed at her to be quiet and beckoned them all forward. They flitted along corridors, stripped with bars of moonlight from the high windows. At every turn, Harry expected to run into Filch or Mrs. Norris, but they were lucky. They sped up the staircase to the third floor and tiptoed towards the trophy room. Malfoy and Crabbe weren't there yet. The crystal trophy cases glimmered where the moonlight caught them. Cups, shields, plates and statues winked silver and gold in the darkness. They edged along the walls, keeping their eyes on the door at either end of the room. Harry took out his wand in case Malfoy leapt and startled them at once. The minutes crept by. "He's late. Maybe he's chickened out," Ron whispered. Then a noise in the next room made them jump. Harry had only just raised his wand when they heard someone speak, and it wasn't Malfoy. "Sniff around, my sweet. They might be lurking in a corner." It was Filch speaking to Mrs. Norris. Horror-struck, Harry waved madly at the other three to follow him as quickly as possible. They scurried silently towards the door, away from Filch's voice. Neville's robes had barely whipped round the corner when they heard Filch into the trophy room. "They're in here somewhere," he heard them mutter, "probably hiding." "This way," Harry mouthed to the others, and petrified, they began to creep down a long galley full of suits of armour. They could hear Filch getting nearer. Neville suddenly let out a frightened squeak and broke into a run. He tripped, grabbed Ron around the waist, and the pair of them toppled right into a suit of armour. The clanging and the crashing were enough to wake the whole castle. "Run!" Harry yelled, and the four of them sprinted down the gallery, not looking back to see whether Filch was following. They swung around the doorpost and galloped down one corridor and then another. Harry in the lead without any idea where or when they were going. They ripped through a tapestry and found themselves in a hidden passageway. Hurtling along it, they came out near the charms classroom, which they knew was miles from the trophy room. "I think we've lost him," Harry panted, leaning against the cold wall and wiping his forehead. Neville was bent double, wheezing and spluttering. "I told you!" Hermione gasped, clutching at a stitch in her chest. "I told you!" "We've got to get back to the Gryffindor Tower," said Ron, "quickly as possible." "Malfoy tricked you," Hermione said to Harry. "You realise that, don't you? He was never going to meet you. Filch knew someone was going to be in the trophy room. Malfoy must have tipped him off." Harry thought that she was probably right, but he wasn't going to tell her that. Let's go. It wasn't going to be that simple. They had gone more than a dozen paces when a doorknob rattled and something came shooting out of the classroom in front of them. It was Peeves. He caught sight of them and gave a squeal of delight. "Shut up, Peeves, please. You'll get us thrown out." Peeves cackled. "Wander around at midnight, echo firsties. Naughty, naughty, you'll get caughty." "Not if you don't give us away, Peeves, please." "Should tell Fitch. I should," said Peeves in a saintly voice, but his eyes glittered wickedly. "It's for your own good, you know." "Get out of the way," snapped Ron, taking a swipe at Peeves. This was a big mistake. "Students, out of the bed!" Peeves bellowed. "Students, out to bed, down the charms corridor!" Ducking under Peeves, they ran for their lives, right to the end of the corridor where they slammed into a door and it was locked. This is it," Ron moaned as he pushed helplessly at the door. "We're done for. This is the end." They could hear footsteps. Filch running as fast as he could towards Peeves' shouts. "Oh, move over!" Hermione snarled. She grabbed Harry's wand, tapped the lock and whispered, "Alohomora!" The lock clicked and the door swung open. They piled through it, shut it quickly and pressed their ears against it, listening. "Which way did they go, Peeves?" Filch was saying. "Quick, tell me." "Say please." "Don't mess me about, Peeves. Now, where did they go?" "Shan't say nothing if you don't say please," said Peeves in his annoying sing-song voice. "All right, please." "Nothing. Told you I wouldn't say nothing if you didn't say please." And they heard the sound of Peeves whooshing away and Filch cursing in rage. "He thinks this door is locked," Harry whispered. "I think we'll be okay." "Get off, Neville." Neville had been tugging on the sleeve of Harry's dressing gown for the last minute. "What?" Harry turned around and saw quite clearly what. For a moment he was sure that he had walked into a nightmare. This was too much. On top of everything that had happened so far, they weren't in a room, as he'd supposed. They were in a corridor, the forbidden corridor on the 3rd floor, and now they knew why it was forbidden. They were looking straight into the eyes of a monstrous dog. A dog which filled the whole space between ceiling and floor. It had 3 heads, 3 pairs of rolling mad eyes, 3 noses twitching and quivering in their direction, 3 drooling mouths, saliva hanging in slippery ropes from yellowish fangs. It was standing quite still, all 6 eyes staring at them, and Harry knew the only reason that they weren't already dead was that their sudden appearance had taken it by surprise. But it was quickly getting over that. There was no mistaking what those thunderous growls meant. Harry groped for the doorknob. Between Filch and death, he'd take Filch. They fell backwards. Harry slammed the door shut and they ran. They almost flew back down the corridor. Filch must have hurried off to look for them somewhere else because they didn't see him anywhere. But they hardly cared. All they wanted to do was to put as much space between them and that monster. They didn't stop running until they reached the portrait of the fat lady on the 7th floor. "Where on earth have you been?" she asked, looking at their dressing gowns hanging off their shoulders and their flushed, sweaty faces. "Never mind that. Pig snout, panted Harry, and the portrait swung forward. They scrambled into the common room and collapsed, trembling into the armchairs. It was a while before any of them said anything. Neville indeed looked like he would never speak again. What do they think they're doing, keeping a thing like that locked up in school? Said Ron finally. If any dog needs exercise, that one does. Hermione had got both her breath and her bad temper back again. You didn't use your eyes, any of you, did you? She snapped. Didn't you see what it was standing on? The floor? Harry suggested. I wasn't looking at its feet. I was too busy with its heads. No, not the floor. It was standing on a trapdoor. It's obviously guarding something. She stood up, glaring at them. I hope you're pleased with yourself. We could all have been killed, or worse, expelled. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to bed. Ron stared after her, his mouth open. No, we don't mind, he said. You'd think we'd dragged her along, wouldn't you? But Hermione had given Harry something else to think about. As he climbed back into bed, the dog was guarding something. What had Hagrid said? Gringotts was the safest place in the world for something that you wanted to hide, except, perhaps, Hogwarts. It looked as though Harry had found out where the grubby little package from Vault 713 was. Blimey. Okie dokie. Hope you've cleaned your teeth. I hope you've washed your hands, because you've got to keep that up. Now, off to your bed and snuggle in. Oh, what a big huge cuddle. And I'll see you tomorrow for Chapter 10, Halloween. Night-night.